Welcome to Soft Talk. Let's move beyond the national frontiers. Let's visit Iran first. A strong earthquake, a 6.1 magnitude earthquake, has killed 5 people and left 44 people, or more than that, injured in the southern Gulf coast of Iran. Several news agencies, including the Associated Press and the Reuters, have reported this natural disaster. The quake in Iran comes just days after the quake in Afghanistan. The Afghan quake also resulted in huge losses of lives and properties. And that is not the only disaster story that we are having these days. A closer home in Manipur, a massive landslide has resulted in huge losses of lives and properties. As per the Hindustan Times daily, the death toll from that Manipur landslide has already increased to 34. Rescue efforts are already underway, and the toll is expected to rise. This landslide occurred in a construction site, a railway construction site. It's just a huge rubble. It just went under the rubble. It's a massive landslide, and this points at the vulnerability of the mountains. When we are just carrying out development works, are we just taking into account the carrying capacity of our mountains and the hills and the southern plains? This begs the question. Let's move on to Nepal. It has been a very disastrous year, literally. Floods, landslides, etc., etc., have occurred with the onset of the monsoon season. This is nothing new for Nepal. In fact, Nepal is one of the most vulnerable countries when it comes to natural disasters. Disasters like earthquake, landslides, and floods. Despite these vulnerabilities, despite uh, the fact that Nepal lies on this seismic fault zone, despite the fact that Nepal's hills and the mountains are quite prone to landslides, despite the fact that the southern plains are quite susceptible to flooding and inundation, we have been carrying out development activities in a mindless manner, in a very absurd manner. Despite the vulnerability of the mountains, we have been constructing roads with scant regard for this environmental fragility, the susceptibility to quakes, the susceptibility to landslide, the same on the lap of the mountains and the hills. We have been going ahead with the construction of reservoir-based hydropower projects. We are not taking into account the threats that these projects pose to downstream settlements, not only to address our needs for power and water. We have been catering to the needs of India, to export power to India at cheap rates, to export, to just sell the water to India, thirsty India at dirt cheap rates, whether it's the West Seti project, whether it's the Seti 6 project, the Upper Karnali project, the Arun 3 project. There are countless projects like the Mahakali, the Tanakpur Barrage, the Kosi Dam, the Kosi Barrage, and the Gandak Barrage. All these have been constructed or are in the process of construction to cater to India's demand for water and clean energy. And who puts the environmental bills of these development works? Nepal, of course, with the diversion of Kosi, with the channeling of the Kosi river. Nepal has been, parts of Nepal have gone underwater. There is a huge scarcity of water in areas like Dharan. With the channeling of the Gandak river through the Gandak barrage, our paddy fields have been lying barren. There is no water for irrigation. These structures inundate Nepal's land and protect the neighboring Indian territories from flooding and inundation. So we have been putting the environmental bills of these development works. Once again, we have been quite susceptible, we have become quite susceptible to the effects of monsoon disasters. But what has the government been doing all along? These are recurring things. Every year, these disasters occur. We need no experts to point that the natural disasters like floods and landslides will visit us this year also. But despite this obvious conclusion, the government has not been doing enough. In fact, the government is busy inspecting areas, inaugurating projects. It has not been catering to the needs of the vulnerable people, the vulnerable populations. What it has been doing is inaugurating the construction of airports and things like that at the expense of the most affected people, the people who are quite likely to get hit when the disasters like flooding and landslides and quakes happen. This begs the question, is this government a man-made disaster or a natural disaster? I leave this question to the audience. I leave it to them to assess the performance of this government. With this remark, I wrap up this edition of Soft Talk. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.